All right, team. Welcome. Jason, you doing okay over there?
Yeah. Long time to take a sip of water.
Bad timing.
Way to start. Way to start.
So just welcome everybody to Coach's Corner. Every other week we bring together a few of our certified scaling up coaches and sometimes accountability coaches to answer your questions and give you our perspective on what we're seeing with our Petra members and in the world of business. Joining us today are my friends and counterparts, Mark Comiso and Jason Rush, and myself, Jennifer Fott. We'll start off with some intros, and I want you guys to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, and then we'll just jump into the questions. So Mark, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer. Great to be here again. Love Coach's Corner. Fun time to chat about things that are going on in the world. Background, parallel entrepreneur, love to build companies again and again. And after doing that way too many times, decided that helping others do the same thing was really my passion. So came over and joined the Petra team 2+ years ago. So I've been doing this coaching thing at Petra for 2 years, working with scaling up for almost 20. So love this system and love working with others to help them move themselves forward and their businesses as well. Based in San Francisco, so out on the West Coast, much like my good friend Jason Rush, who I will push it over to now.
Yeah, so another West Coaster, Jason Rush, Phoenix, Arizona. Grew up here, been here most of my life other than 10 years when I was enjoying Southern California, which was nice. I've been coaching with Petra for 4.5 years. I've been coaching directly for 10 years. And prior to that, kind of like Mark, serial entrepreneur, owned several different companies. And we actually implemented what was Vern's first book, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, in my last company. And so we grew that exponentially using the system. And from there, people just asked me to help out. So I became an accidental coach. Was never the plan of it at all. And I just started working with companies, and suddenly I had sort of this coaching business I did not know and did not know what to do with. So I started working and really enjoyed it. And found a passion for helping people and watching people grow their companies. It was the realization that I didn't have to be the person that was driving the growth, that I could be somebody who could support and help people do it. And I was getting the same level of satisfaction, if not more, in certain ways. So that's my quick background. Glad to be here.
Awesome. I am Jennifer Fott. I'm located here in Nashville, where I live with my husband, Andy, who's a financial planner. And we also have 2 Great Danes. That's a fun fact, totaling 260 pounds each. Just kidding, just together.
Wow.
Yeah. I exited a business almost 3 years ago. Similar to Jason, sort of became an accidental coach. And I've been coaching with Petra Coach for almost 2 years now. Some of you have joined us live on Facebook, and some of you have registered through our Zoom link. So if you're joining us live, type your question in the chat box or in the chat underneath the Facebook Live video, and we'll make sure to get those questions pulled over to us. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can pop that question in the Q&A within the Zoom window. So submit that to us. We've also received some questions in advance, and I'll just get us kicked off with one of those. And I'll say too, you know, we just recently surveyed our members with the top concerns for them. And one of the questions that came in was around, potential recession coming this fall or early next year. So how do you, and I'll start with you, Jason, how do you feel like businesses should be preparing for that potential recession?
That's a good question. You know, it's something I've kind of been already talking to a lot of my members about. You know, I would say the first thing is that a lot of businesses have already sort of had to prepare for what looks like a recession based on what's happened with the pandemic and COVID. Everybody started looking at their expenses and managing their expenses and do a better job of managing cash. And those 2 things alone will help you to navigate. But a couple other things that I see is, make sure that you're still investing in your people. There's going to be, with any recession, it creates doubt and concern in teams and people. And so whatever you can do to alleviate that by still investing in them, still investing in their growth, still investing in team activities is still extremely important, because you still want your team to perform at the highest level. You don't want them looking and going, are we next? right? So you want to give them an environment that they feel safe and secure in. So whatever you've been doing, I would say invest, continue to invest, if not look at new ways of doing things. The other way is, I think is really important, is to look at your brand awareness and invest in your brand awareness. So recessions cause people to potentially buy less, is the risk. And what you want to do is you always want to stay top of mind with anything that's happened. So invest in your people, invest in your brand awareness, and then manage your cash through this. At this point right now, everybody should start thinking about, how do I build cash? So look at what you can do to build some cash right now. Look at bank lines, look at the SBA, look at different options to create sort of that cash bucket, if you will, and then continue to manage your expenses. Mark, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, all good ones, Jason. I totally agree with you. I think, given that we had a rapid entry into a recession, right, tossed in very, very rapidly with the pandemic on March 13th, a lot of people, the members I've been working with and others that I've seen out there, kind of jumped right into, okay, I'm going to do this, and it was almost at a hurried pace, and it kind of had I called it an adrenaline pace. And now we've gotten past that adrenaline pace, and what I'm working with, folks on is, okay, what do we do now that we're getting to a steady state of things we understand? So, and if we understand what they are and it could possibly change in the future, then what are the things that are under our control? So I'm really talking with them about really understand what is under your control and what isn't. And the things that are under your control, work on. And to your point, Jason, is, cash is one of them. That's certainly within our control. Understand the mechanisms within your business, really understanding what the gross margins are in your business, and, spending time on that. What things are profitable, what things maybe were nice to do or fun to do, but weren't necessarily generating a lot of profit to the bottom line. And really, if you can understand that now, right, in the time where we've kind of come off this immediate, kind of jittery phase, and then look at the future, then, can help you set up for the future a little bit better. I think too, much like you were saying, Jason, when you go to the people part, I also think this is, as we look forward, the thing that really keeps businesses in place is the culture. So it's the people and the culture that you create. We don't know what's going to happen around us, but we can control those things. So really work on what is our culture, making sure we both understand it and can build it up. It usually doesn't cost a lot to do that. So focusing on those things. The last thing I'll add is I agree with you on the cash part of it. Of how can we protect the cash we have and or build up possible reserves. I think it's a great time to be talking with your bank. Right? Everybody's kind of like, oh, I don't, things are crazy. But you know what? This is when bankers want to know, what are you doing and how do you see things? Because later on, if a recession is coming and it comes, if you're there knocking on the door when it happens, that's not the time to be asking for more money. It's ahead of time saying, here's who we are. Yep, exactly. So there's some thoughts for you.
Always with a bank. My very previous life, I worked for a bank. And the one thing I definitely learned was, ask for money when you don't need it. Don't ask for money when you need it. That's usually when they're not there. So if you, unless you're doing an acquisition, if you just need it for growth or something else, they typically are not there. If you don't need the money, that's when you go ask for the money. So having those lines of credit and reserve are extremely helpful.
Yeah, I mean, set yourself up with that capital now in preparation, right? So I think you can look for other ways to be creative. I mean, since I'm married to a financial planner, we have a lot of these conversations at the dinner table. Maybe it's boring for some, maybe it's not, but we were actually talking about this last night. If you have money that you've saved while using your PPP money to cover payroll, what are you going to do with that money? Because cash is going to be everything for the rest of this year specifically. You also may not owe as much tax this year as you were originally saving for. So if you were saving for taxes based off of 2019 numbers and you're having a really good year, you go dig through those numbers again and see, if you are saving, if you don't need to save as much for taxes, in April of next year. And I'll just say, diversify that revenue is the last thing. So look for ways you can recession proof your business, diversify that revenue. if you shouldn't be heavily dependent on just a few customers. So look at that customer mix. If any single buyer represents more than 10%, or the top 5 of your clients represent a quarter of your business, that's a key that you need to diversify. So start with targeting industries that might be recession proof, or that maybe were deemed essential, and that we're able to stay open and even profit through this as a way to diversify that and recession proof your business. Anything else to add there? We all got a little bit hot on that one.
Well, I think it's a real topic, and I think it's something that's going to be a real concern for a lot of companies. I think for some people, they're already in a recession. If you're in the hospitality industry, you're worse than a recession. I mean, so I think some businesses are learning to operate. Yeah, I think some industries are right now learning how to work through it. A lot of companies that I work with, the revenue is down, but they're preparing their business for this is a long haul, and I think that's the right way to look at this. This is, the situation we're in, whether it be with a pandemic or recession, is not going away anytime soon. So I think the more that you can plan for this and understand, like, this is where our business is, and this is the framework we have. Now let's start building a plan, work around that. So it just might look different than what your original plan was.
Yeah, and so that's a perfect segue into thinking about, business owners are working off, or have been working off of a plan that was created, 6 months ago, or last November, or last December. How do we plan for next year? And when this old plan feels obsolete, Mark, I'll throw that one over to you as far as like planning for next year. What does that need to look like for businesses?
I think even when things are unknown, you still, as leaders in organizations, right, we still have to look to the future as far out as we can see. I think what I'm working with and suggesting to people is maybe make that time slice, if you will, break it up a little bit more, make a few more touch points in the year, right? Make a plan for 2021 and, use information you have today, right? We did that last November, December. We used the information we had then. Nobody in their SWOT analysis under threats put pandemic in there. It just wasn't there a year ago. I know.
All my members did. Mark, you didn't have them do that?
Okay. Sorry, Jason. I'm just not as good as you. But, in saying that, go with the information we have today. Yes. There's some unknowns. So I wouldn't be putting huge stretch goals. I wouldn't be, if things have been going along at a 20% a year, 50% a year clip for the last 3 or 4 years, I wouldn't be putting that in as your 2021 plan. But with the best information you have now and the data you have, let's put a plan together and then look to measure it at more points in between. Instead of maybe quarterly looking at it, maybe we're going to look at that monthly against how are we on target against that. Has anything happened in the last 30 days as compared to the last 90 days towards that annual goal? So setting the goal is important. We have to know the destination, or else we'll get there with great accuracy if we don't even pick one. But it's usually not the place we want to go. So pick that destination and then make some milestone touch points that are shorter so that you can understand if you're on the right pathway, and then course correct, adjust.
Right. And Mark, you touched on, making the adjustments. You have to communicate those beyond just your executive team, so that when you pick that target, the rest of the organization shifts in the right way. So there's a lot of stuff around, how do you communicate that? How do you drive those changes through an organization? And, we can talk a little bit about that too. Jason, did you have anything to add?
Well, I think definitely it starts with setting some new targets, right? And so, we typically look out, 3 to 5 years and set targets for 3 to 5 years. We do the annual, we do quarterly. I would definitely say it looks at resetting those targets. And as Mark said, look at them more frequently. It might make sense to course correct after a month, after 2 months, and a quarter, to understand where the trends are going. The other thing I just want to add is, and you kind of touched on it, Jennifer, is make sure you're communicating the adjustment to the plan to your team, particularly any target changes. So what team members need is they need to feel confident that leadership has their hands fully on the wheel. So if you come in and present and say, hey, we had budgeted for a 20% growth this year, And we're still going to go with that. Unless you have a real specific plan, acquisition or something to get there, it might not happen, right? So you might need to revive, hey, we're just looking to stay even where we were last year. That can be a great plan during a recession. And so if that's the plan, make sure you communicate it so people know that your hands are firmly on the wheel of understanding of not only the business, but the economy and your industry. And that's what people look for. They need that confidence from leadership to understand where they need to go.
Yeah, so speaking of shifting targets and ramping sales up, we have a question from Kirk and also another question from Chris around sales. So Kirk says, is now a good time to increase the sales force? And Chris's question is, where we were so focused on retention of current clients and sales slowed down, how do we get our company focused on ramping sales back up? So I just had a conversation with a member in this past week about ramping sales back up. And the good news is everybody's used to this virtual environment now. So sales can happen virtually. And the company I was working with just last week were telling me that they closed one of their biggest contracts to date, and they did not even have to go into the client's location. And that was weird for them because they sell a very like high touch, service that felt like they needed to be face to face with someone and in their space to sell. So putting the focus back on sales and not only on client retention is going to be key, I think, for Q3, Q4 to finish out this year. So in that planning day with that member, putting that spotlight on sales, we did that through creating a specific company priority around a very specific outcome, right? So it wasn't let's ramp up marketing, let's do an email campaign, but the outcome of that was to get 10 new members at a dollar amount of monthly recurring revenue. So not just 10 new, but at a minimum recurring revenue number for them. And then we looked back and we said, what's the critical number that we need to be tracking that's a leading indicator, something that we know we're on track to get to those 10 closings. And we said we need to have at least 60 people, to get in at least 60 people to sit in front of us with a sales appointment. So they know they're on track to close those 10. And then it goes back, because all of this is connected, right, guys? I mean, it's all connected about communication, setting targets. We had to get everybody focused on creating that quarterly theme and creating the activity around that priority and that critical number. Jason, I know you love doing themes with your members. Do you want to go over what that looks like?
Well, I was going to add another point real quick is, I was in a meeting and one of the salespeople in the meeting said, I don't feel like I can sell. I almost feel guilty selling. And, my comment was, it's probably sales today and how you might do your selling is going to look different, right? Whether it be virtual, you need to get comfortable with it. And his comment was, I have to be face to face. And so the example I use this in different scenarios. I said, so the gyms are closed. Have you stopped working out? No. Oh, okay. So you found other things to do besides going to the gym. Yes. Great. It's the same thing. You have to shift your mind away from necessarily what we did to what we can do, right? And you have to have that as kind of a mental shift. So, to Kirk's question is it a good time to invest? I would say absolutely, it's a great time to invest. First of all, there's probably talent out there to go get. So you can look in and how do we upgrade the talent that we have or just add to the talent that we have. So it's a great time to invest in that. It's once again, goes back to your brand awareness, right? And promoting your brand awareness, and sales teams are great at doing that because that's how you're going to get through this. The people always talk about, well, I've cut my expenses. You can only cut expenses to a certain point. There's a point where revenue has to take over. And so, manage your expenses, but really focus on how do you grow and maximize your revenue. And it's really the perfect time to do that because I think everybody's kind of switched out of where we were in March, April, May of sort of afraid to do these things to now where it's like, look, we need to do it. We need to get back to life. We need to get back to normalcy in how we run our business. So I think it's really important to do that. So you asked me a question about themes. Or go ahead, Mark.
I was going to key off of that a little bit. We'll always come back to your themes, Jason, because they're awesome. But I would kind of echo what you both are saying. Right now, again, going to Kurt's question, is a great time on the sales side of, it's like we were saying before, it's a great time to question everything in a positive way from a business perspective. Yes, we aren't going to do the same things that we did in the past, but that means we have an opportunity in the future. We just have to look at what that opportunity is. So working with the sales team to say, I like your analogy, Jason, of, hey, we used to do it this way of going to the gym. Our goal is still to work out, right? Our goal is still to communicate to the world what our product or service is. And how are we going to do that? What can we do? Again, what's in our control? And really spending time in doing that with the sales team. And some of it may be, getting their input, also having them go out and, testing the marketplace and doing that and figuring out what new avenues there are. Because I guarantee you there's a lot of people, a lot of businesses that are frozen, right? That's what they're doing. They're like, okay, there's a lot of people out that are like, I'm going to just wait for things to get better. And I'm telling everybody I know, right, and working with is those are not the people that survive and make it, into the future. The ones that survive and make it the future are the ones that are, peeking their head up a little bit and looking out and giving these new opportunities the chance to mature within their organizations. I also think too, I know we all talked about this a little bit in the past, but I think there's a huge opportunity right now with, consumers and the buyers of the products are now in a mind space of, hey, what is out there, right? It used to be I bought the product, I went to the gym out of habit. So I just went to the gym. Now I'm questioning and going, okay, well, how could I get a workout in? I'm open to a personal trainer. I'm open to, doing something different, right? Getting a Peloton bike, doing whatever it may be, I'm open. And I think businesses need to see that opening as an opportunity, invest in the salespeople to meet those people where they are and take advantage of that versus just kind of hanging out waiting.
Yep, I agree. Themes. So what are some good themes around sales?
Well, I think specifically, how do we get an entire organization around, rallying back from a sales perspective, right? So it's not just on the CEO or the business development person or the sales team. This can be a whole effort from the entire company, right?
Yeah.
So, themes are one way that we do that with our members at Petra.
Yeah, one of my favorite themes that we did was the theme was called "Shut It Down," and the company had a really big target for revenue in the last quarter, and so what we did was we basically created a scenario where if we hit that target, we're going to close the company down for 2 weeks over the holidays, and it was amazing the alignment that it showed, because you do need everybody to do their job. Because it is not just the salesperson's job to sell. There's also people that have to deliver on that sale, whether it be accounting to do invoicing on time, do it the right way, whether it be order processing to do it the right way. Whatever the process is for within your organization, there isn't one person that does it. If it is, that's called a job, not a company. So the fact is, you've got multiple people that are going to go through it. You want to get everybody on board going in the same direction. And this company not only, and this was their largest quarter they ever had by almost 30%, and to meet their annual bonus that they all got. So they hit that number, and then they shut the company down for 2 weeks, like they said. And it would truly, like, now seeing the results of it going to the next quarter, so going from the fourth quarter into the first quarter, which was a challenging quarter for a lot of people, they had this incredible momentum that continued, right? So that's kind of looking at it. So how do you keep the process going, and how do you get everybody involved? So themes that work across channels and not just in one area is what makes them most successful.
Yeah, follow-up question from Kirk. Kurt, thank you so much for sending in questions. If you have questions, go ahead and send them in via Facebook or the Q&A, and we'll get them answered. So he says, I'm thinking this might be a good time to get a bargain on acquisitions to expand my business. How do I find them? I'm a landscape and snow service provider to commercial clients. Mark, I'm going to go to this one for you to answer.
All right. Funny. I wonder if Kurt doesn't. The name doesn't ring a bell, but I used to work with a landscaping and snow service provider in the East Coast. I do think there are opportunities for acquisitions, right? This is a great time for that, to look at that. I think we go back to, you do have to balance. We started out with, hey, people are asking questions about recession. Cash is going to be king. So how you do those acquisitions will be important, right? Is it something that's going to take a lot of cash outlay? Is it something you can partner with somebody in the expectation that, that will fold into the organization in the future? I think there's a lot more possibility right now of how you structure deals that are out there. Answering Kurt's question specifically of how you find them, that is a challenging one. It's always challenging. There are organizations you can go to that work in this field of mergers and acquisitions that you can find that in. I think a lot of it is really, being out there. I always say that, as leaders of an organization, we should always be both looking at the bench of the people we want in our organization, but also looking at the bench, if you will, of other opportunities, whether that be a merger and acquisition that might come in or somebody that might be interested in us. So I guess my communication to Kurt would be to get out there, as best you can and during our social distancing phase, but, be talking with people and asking the question, just saying, hey, we're always looking for opportunities to partner, to work with great organizations or other people. Do you know anybody that's in this space or doing something similar? It's asking those types of kind of engaging questions. It's not saying, hey, I want to buy somebody, but just opening the door and seeing if people you may know or others, by hearing it say, oh, I had heard about so-and-so. So opportunity.
I was going to say, a great way to do it is assuming you're going in, first is if you're going in your target market, in your current market, is you probably know who the competitors are, and you probably know what businesses you're interested in, and create that list, and then go talk to them and see what they'd be interested in. You have no idea. They might be interested in it. They might not be interested. I guarantee that's a quick conversation that you can have to get an idea of if they're interested or not. I do have a couple companies that are looking at acquisitions right now. So, and how they just did it was approach the people. If you're going out of market, probably need to do a little bit more research on, who's out there as far as, and look for, when you look at acquisitions, look for a cultural fit within your organization. Because you want that to be as seamless as possible. So you want to look for some level of connection with their culture. It's not going to be exact, but just look for some level of connection. If you're a board short company, t-shirt, flip-flop organization, going to look at a company that's, always wearing suit and ties, that's not going to be a good fit. Obviously in your industry, that's probably not the case. But once again, you want to look for that sort of that fit of something that might work within your organization.
So going back a little bit to sales, this relates, question came in from Holly from California, or in California. So your home state, Mark. So sales is working for this company, right? She says, we have orders coming in, but not the people to complete our orders. Any suggestion on what we can do? That's all you.
All on me, huh? So I'm from California. I'm going to answer Holly here. It certainly is a challenge that we've seen in a number of different places, which are, there are segments of the economy and the business marketplace that are doing well. And yet, their teams are, sheltered in place. They're at home. Some of them maybe had to be furloughed even. I think for those businesses that are struggling, it kind of goes a little bit to what Kurt was saying, which is on acquisition. I think there is an opportunity now too on the people acquisition side, right? To be looking for good people. I mentioned earlier, we should always be looking for the bench of people. This is an opportunity to reach out and maybe bring some people on in a part-time basis, on hey, we've got a contract basis, right? We've got this opportunity because we do have some contracts right now. We need some extra help for this next quarter. Would you be interested in getting involved with us to help us out there? So, maybe doing some contract work where you haven't done that in the past, or where it was harder to get those contract workers. In the current environment, it's a lot easier to do that. Much like it's the same thing I was going to mention on the kind of acquisition side. It used to be kind of, if people said they were available to work, you the question mark was, why are they available? If they're really good at what they do, they wouldn't be available. That's not the case right now. A lot of really good people are available because of, a situation that was not of their control. So as you're looking, Holly, for, how do you get that work built out, be reaching out, asking people, looking for good people that could come in on a part-time basis. And if you happen to find a diamond in the rough and you can bring them in, and, you have the contracts to support bringing that great player, A player in, then, pull that trigger faster.
Yeah, I was also thinking of a little different angle, Mark, is if putting the people to the side for a second, look at your processes. So you built your processes typically around the roles you currently have. And if currently you don't have some of those roles, take a look at the processes you have and redevise them based on the current situation of what will work within it. So if you're not able to go out and add people, which I think is great if you can, but if you're not, look at the processes and see if there's changes you need to make that'll more reflect your current company environment as opposed to when you created them.
Yeah, I think too.
I also think go ahead, Jennifer.
Go ahead. Finish your thought.
But I was going to say, I think too that I think a lot of it, when in that question of, we can't get the work done. I think a lot of this and a lot of this time, there's a lot of forgiveness, if you will, in the marketplace right now with our customers, and communicating with customers and saying, hey, you know what, this is what's going on. Is there a way that we could deliver half of the order to you by this date and the other half by another date down the road due to, cycles, whatever it is. So I think a lot more, possibility of from our customers and flexibility are available to us, and, being a little bit vulnerable as a business and saying, hey, we want to supply the product and service for you. This is how we can do it. Will that meet your needs? A little more of that these days. There's a lot more leeway. So, Jennifer?
Yeah, I think with organizations that maybe had to furlough or lay off early in this pandemic, that internal supply chain might be a challenge because workers don't want to come back to work. And so whether that be something that has to do with, the federal unemployment they're still receiving, something like health insurance is a great way to incentivize them to returning, some sort of benefit to incentivize them to return. Yeah. Sometimes you have people that have no way to take care of their kids if they go back to work. We're entering into this fall season. School is going to start back up, and now you've got this challenge of how am I going to make that work? And I think that just is about employers having to be flexible about what their relationship with their employees is like during that time. You can use PPP loans to pay employees higher wages maybe than they were making before to close that gap between salaries and unemployment. Worst case scenario, you have to pay back the loan rather than getting all of it forgiven, but it might be worth it to you just to get your team back so you can, create those orders. Yeah. So speaking of, Ashford from Nashville sent a question in about team members facing the decision of school districts choosing virtual, in-person, or a hybrid approach in the fall for their students. How can businesses support their employees through this while not losing productivity? So we have a Petra Forum group every other week, or is it weekly now, I think, with member CEOs. And so this is a question that actually we just answered and helped one of our member CEOs work through. So I'll share a couple of things about what we shared in that forum setting where we were helping him solve this. We came up with the idea that maybe you can hire an accountability coach, like what we have here at Petra. We have accountability coaches that hold our teams accountable to make sure that they're meeting their priorities each quarter. You could have a virtual accountability coach or tutor, if you want to call it that, for older students maybe that don't need such direct supervision. So it doesn't just fall on the parents' shoulders to make sure that they're, every time they take a break to go fill their coffee, like, have you moved on to your next lesson yet? Are you still paying attention, or are you on Facebook, and they have to be, reminded to continue completing that virtual homework and things like that. Can you provide childcare? Can you create a partnership with a daycare of some sort? We also had the idea of maybe hiring somebody to run errands for them, so they don't have to go run errands or go pick up groceries. Uber drivers are not driving as much. I guarantee you have a favorite Uber driver that you could hire maybe to just run errands at any time, for your team. And I think it goes back to can you adjust your hours? Maybe they can work a different schedule. In the mornings they're in the office, or in the afternoons they're out. And what does that look like? And just ultimately comes down to being flexible for me. And I know Jason and Mark, you have, young daughter, and you're right in the thick of that. Jason, same with you, little older kids. I'd love to hear your perspective as parents.
Well, the one thing I could say is my wife, just before this, my wife and I were having this exact conversation because my younger son's school district is asking by Monday for us to respond to whether they come back full-time or we do online for at least a semester. So he does not want to do online. So we're weighing the health, but they're very clear. We're not socially distancing. They will have to wear masks, but they're still going to load up the kids with, 400 kids in a classroom. So it's one of those things where we're really having to understand it. And I do think it puts it's going to resume the challenge that people had when this originally occurred, when everybody had to work from home. The difference is that time has passed. And so we were all felt like we were in it together. And now we're kind of stepping out of that into far more individual. Different states have different requirements. And it's not as clear cut as it was back in March and April, May. So I think you do have to look at and have conversations with your team about what do they need, and making sure that it meshes with what you need. So as the employer, it's important for you to state, these are the things that the absolutes I need, and get an understanding from the team member of what they can deliver on, just so the expectations are lined up. Because I feel like if the expectations aren't lined up, that's going to create a lot of issues and a lot of challenges. I had a company yesterday I worked with, and this is a little different, but it's sort of the same mindset. Is they had a person that was exposed to COVID, so they didn't work for 2 weeks. They worked from home for 2 weeks, came back for a day, and then said, "Oh, I was exposed again," and now she's gone again. So it's like I think that companies need to come up with parameters of what works in every scenario, so that there's an understanding of like, this will work, this won't work. And once again, aligning those expectations.
I think I'm going to key off on something you said there, Jason. I think it's very, very true, which is I always say I have a classic definition of disappointment. And disappointment is that zone between expectation and reality, right? Yeah. So as a business, as leaders, what we need to do is set the expectation, right? That's the boundary. And then knowing that that's the expectation, right, that this is what we're aiming to do, and this is the, boundary that we have, then great, how can we work within that? Because if we just let it go to all of our team's perspectives, they'll fill in that zone with their own thoughts, and it usually gets wider apart, and then somebody's not happy. We as a business aren't, because we don't have the team. The team is feeling like we're over managing, whatever it may be. In this scenario, Jennifer, on the kids back to school, I do agree with you, Jason. It's a much different. It's going to be much different this fall than it was last spring. Last spring, again, I think we all jumped in, with our families, with our kids, and we're going to get in this and through it together. Been a rough road. Those of us who have kids know it. It's how do you want the best for your kids. You want them to be learning and growing, and when we're all trying to balance all the things we have in our lives and do that as well, that's a tough thing. So to your point, Jason, I think it's about being flexible as leaders in business, working with your team to understand, what their constraints are and what could help. And Jennifer, I love that idea of, hey, how can we, add support to us to help do this, right? And what might that look like? And be very, have an open conversation about that. It's like, hey, we want to create solutions that work for all of us.
Yeah, it reminds me of when in my company, I had flexible start times. People started at 7, people started at 9. And I didn't really care when you started, except for one thing. You had to pick when you were starting. meaning you didn't come in today at 7 and tomorrow I'll just come in at 9. And part of that was, once again, sort of those expectations of what was expected. I think the same thing is what's expected. If you're going to have to work from home because your child is not going to go to school, that they are going to do online, then I think you have to look at it and say, as the employer, what are your clear expectations of them during the day, and get an alignment on that. Because I think, as Mark said, that's where the disappointment comes in of what you're expecting and the reality of it. You know, you need to bridge that gap, and the key to it is communicating and alignment through it.
Yeah, and
I think you, Jason, Jennifer, and I keep going over each other. It's awesome. I think that the key, much like we all, work with our members on, is really having clear, priorities and tasks and things very well, lined out. And that's where a tool like Align, right, which we use here at Petra, is so awesome, because if someone is working from home, knowing, okay, the expectation is that here's the task, here's the due date, here's who's responsible for it. And even when we're in different locations, being able to say, I have good confidence that people know what they need to do to get their job done, so that we get the result that we expect, that expectation.
Yeah, if anybody's curious about that, it's aligntoday.com. And, it's a tool that gives you a good snapshot into the progress that you're making toward numbers, priorities, huddles, and the daily rhythms, meeting rhythms that we help organizations come up with are all housed in that one dashboard. It's in our chat box, aligntoday.com. If you're interested in learning more about that, reach out to us. So last question, I think probably, if you have one more, we might be able to squeeze one more in. If you have questions, put it in the Q&A or in the Facebook Live chat. So this kind of goes into culture, what we were just talking about. The question is from Dan in Texas. We've watched our culture deteriorate over the last quarter due to stress, virtual environment, furloughs, layoffs, burnout. Is this fixable? Jason, you're the culture.
No, it's not. It's not fixable. Give up.
Shut the door. It's all done.
Give up. Yeah. Just everybody go home. Give them a stapler and say thank you. No, it's absolutely fixable. I would tell you is start small. Think about your culture. Think about what's important. Start small and what you can do. If you're still working remote, you've got some people in the office and some people, working remote. Think about what you can do, not what you can't do. The first thing I'll always start with is recognition and appreciation. So, anybody that's worked with us knows we are big into notes of appreciation. Writing notes of appreciation to your team members is one of the most valuable things you can do. It's also one of the lowest cost things that provide the biggest return you'll ever do. I had an office in Chicago. I would write notes to people in Chicago. I'd come to the office every quarter, and one thing I'd see is up on the wall were all the notes at their desks of the things that of the notes that I sent them. They all had notes there, and so you could tell it meant a lot to them. Being acknowledged, okay, is also extremely important. So look at your meeting rhythms. Are you doing shout outs to people? Are you recognizing people for living core values? I've got companies that write notes and recognize people for living their core values. Still a great thing to do. Like, don't get away from the things you were doing just because it's different. Think about the things you can do today to make a difference. Nothing wrong with a company that I work with just sent food to everybody. They had a team lunch and they sent lunch to everybody in the office. They just used like a Grubhub and sent it out to everybody, right? And so different things you can do, and then have a lunch, do a happy hour. All these things that people feel like, oh, I've kind of gotten away from it. Once again, there can be some Zoom fatigue. There's can be all these different things. Don't forget about your people. Invest in your people. Invest in the culture that supports what you're doing in your business.
Anything to add?
I'll say that I liked it, Jason. Yeah, let's just give them a box and a stapler. It's done. You can't fix it.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I think that once again, right, this is an opportunity to be creative as leaders. I think one of the things that when things are going well, and I think we could all argue that prior to March of this year, things were on a pretty good clip for quite a while. right, in the business world. And we get a little bit lulled into, hey, this is how we do culture and this is how we do things here and it's all just fine. And when you get challenges like this, is an opportunity to go and as a leader to really look and reflect a little bit and say, you know, this is what really matters to us here at this organization. And how do you want that to show up? How do you want that to be alive in your organization? And it might have been in the past, but it was just kind of on, you know, autopilot. So here's your opportunity to bump that up a little bit. And, you know, there's great things right now. I mean, there's a lot of, there's a lot of people from Uber drivers to local restaurants to other people that would love to do something. So if you come up with a wacky, fun idea of delivering, you know, food to everybody's door, I bet you can find people that are willing to do it because they aren't doing other things right now. Whereas back in February, it was hard to find that because everybody was busy. So, you know, get creative, have some fun with it, you know, and I think that's also, you know, a little bit about culture, right? Is how do you make this as this is us? And you lead that charge of, hey, these are our core values. This is really what matters to us. I totally agree with you, Jason. You know, showing appreciation doesn't take a lot. You know, a card sent in the mail, a thank you, and, you know, and a look in the eyes and a thank you goes a long way versus an email and thinking you got it done.
Yeah, and that eyes can be on Zoom. One thing to think about, you know, the culture of your company is a reflection of leadership. So think about, as the leaders of your company, what is the culture that you've created? Because it's a direct reflection on you. So if you're kind of looking around going, boy, our culture's not that strong, look at yourself and think about within yourself, what things do you need to change the culture? Because it's going to start with you. It's going to start with you and your leadership team.
Yeah, this goes back to all of the things that we've talked about already today. You know, transparency. You know, how is the company doing? Is there confidence in the leadership team that things are going to be okay? That's a part of culture. Accountability and using tools like aligntoday.com. That's a part of culture. Getting everyone involved, encouraging, showing appreciation. All of it is a part of this big puzzle that fits together instead of it just being like let's just slap the culture sticker on it and check the box and say we did it. You know, lunches are only just the start, right? It's a lot more to that. So, you know, create a culture warrior team, like a new team that's like this virtual culture team that can come up with some new ways to support your team. Mark, did you have more to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that, you know, as you both were saying, it really is, it's this, you know, it does come from the leadership, right? But it's this opportunity to say, this is what it really means, right? When things are in, you know, autopilot or steady state, you know, it's quote unquote easy. But when it's hard is when it really matters, right? So that's the time that we as leadership set a good tone, right? And I think part of it is not making it fake, right? Not saying, hey, everything's going to be just fine. And look, we slapped up some of those inspirational posters on the wall. And so we're going to just be great. All right. I know, Jason, you got a few in the office there. I know you do. They're hiding.
My
I know.
I'm pretty sure we all just had the same visual of those old posters with the big like word on top, like inspiration, people flying. Right. You know, we all have that in our head.
But I think it's, you know, we all know that, you know, that having core values is important, and being positive is, you know, that is, you know, that does permeate through the organization. But I think being real does too. Right? Hey, you know what? Things are challenging right now. There are a lot of unknowns, but here's what matters to us. This is what matters. Our core values are not changing, right? This is what matters to us. And really showing that. And when you can do that, you know, that's how you build culture back, is saying, yes, you know, it's been challenging and we've had to be focused on other things and we didn't know. And, you know, we've gotten away from it a little bit. It's that honesty. And then communicating what we are doing and how that's going forward that really gets people on board and going, oh yeah, that's what I love about working here and why I want to continue and do the things we need to do.
We have one last question that came in and then we'll close out for the day. How practical and costly is it to outsource a sales manager? How practical and costly is it to outsource a sales manager? From a practicality standpoint, like, you know, I don't know if I would want to outsource sales or a sales manager in my organization, right? I'd want them to be ingrained in the culture and ingrained with the team. And, you know, maybe there's a trial portion of the role before you bring on somebody full time so they can prove themselves to be a fit. But from a practicality standpoint, I'd want them there all the time, full time. Jason, Mark, you may think differently. What are your thoughts on that?
I'll give it a little different spin. It all depends on what you need your sales manager to do. So if it's somebody, let's say you have a sales team and you're the one as a CEO that's leading the sales, leading them as a sales manager, I think outsourcing to somebody who is good at process to drive results works. The difficulty, to your exact point though, Jennifer, is they're not going to be ingrained in the culture. They're not going to have the same commitment because they're really just kind of a hired gun. And they might look at it a little bit different. How did they get the return? And so I think you have to look at it and say, what's the reason that you want to outsource versus bring somebody in? And, Jack Daly, who's a master sales coach, one of the things he always talks about is don't necessarily just take your best salesperson and make them the sales manager, because those are necessarily two different skill sets. So kind of look and see, what do you really need out of a sales manager? I also agree with you, Jennifer. My first thought would be to bring somebody in-house. If that isn't practical, then I think you have to look at it and say, what do I really need from them, and pare that scope down. They're probably not going to go and learn the industry like your salespeople would. But if they understand the process and how to hold these guys accountable and follow through and all these different things, it can work. And I have seen it work. The cost of it, I don't have a feel from the industry of cost. That'd be difficult. We could talk about it, but I wouldn't have a straight feel for the cost.
I think that much kind of along the lines, I'll probably split the difference between the two of you here, but I think along that lines, I think it is about what is it that you want this quote unquote sales manager doing, right? If you're looking for them to be a leader of the sales organization and really understanding who and what we are and how we sell our products and services, I'm with you, Jennifer. I think that's really tough to have an outside person doing that. That said, if what you're looking for is someone to make sure that, people are doing the process that we've outlined well and keeping them on task and just making sure that, holding them accountable, then that's a different thing that I think could get outsourced. I'd almost look at it and say, during this time, I might look at splitting that. How do you get, some people who could help, do that accountability part and kind of supporting them. And then, maybe it's I as a leader or a leadership team is focused on the, hey, how do we, lead the sales organization from this is how we do it, and being out there and talking with, prospects and customers that might be coming in. Because that's just such a crucial part, especially now. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier, especially if you're going to reach new customers, and you're going to be out there, this is your opportunity. Having somebody who maybe hasn't had the history and experience doing that would be a little bit harder.
Yeah.
And I'm with you, Jason. I don't know on the cost.
Yeah.
Different industries, different spaces.
Yeah.
All right. So any final thoughts from Jason or Mark? And Jason, I'll start with you.
Thank you. I always enjoy getting together and doing this. So thank you, Mark, and thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, Leah, for helping run everything as you do. You always do a great job. I think it's just important right now to look at where your company is and take stock of it and recognize that this might be the situation we're in for a bit, right? So what do you need to do to sort of look at your organization and plan for going forward? It doesn't necessarily mean that sales are going to reduce. Look at new things you can do. Look at new ways to sell. Look at new products you can sell. I think that the challenge is when people look at their business and they fall in love with what it was and not what it is. That's the challenge, right? So get away from what it was and go with what it is and what it needs to be. And that's the big thing right now. It's not so much, staying where you are. It's where do you need to be, and planning that out and doing that together, and creating a plan and working the plan is what is critically important.
Mark?
Yeah, I'll echo you there. It's always great to see the both of you. We get to see all of each other a fair amount, but it's always fun to do these things and banter about the things that are going on in our worlds and in the business world. You know, I always go back to a great saying that my dad taught to me many, many years ago, which is, you know, surround yourself by great people and you'll only get better. Right. And I think that's important for us all to remember, even in these times, is how do you, you know, find good people, whether it be employees, whether it be, you know, coaches, whether it be your peers in life. But just keep surrounding yourself by good people. And I know that right now, you know, we talk about social distancing. You know, I heard this early on and you all have heard me say it many times, but I'll say it again, which is, you know, we really don't need the social distance. We need the physical distance, but socially, we need to interconnect. So, you know, surrounding yourself by great people, you know, we can't do it literally, but we can do it just like this, right? You know, I got my friends here and we surround each other and talk about things. And Jason, to your point, look eye to eye in the Zoom is not as good as being in person, but a lot better than a phone or an email. So, you know, I want to encourage everybody to, you know, be physically distanced, but socially engaged and surround yourself by great people and be a great person to others. Jennifer?
Yeah, so I'll close this out by just saying, you know, I think businesses have a lot of opportunities in front of them to change, to address things that have always been maybe a thorn in the side, to shift, to, I'll say the word, pivot. Jason, I know you love that word. But I have this sticky note on my desk, and it says, if you start with the can't, you're right. So I want to make sure that, you know, you as a CEO and your team are making sure that you're not saying, well, we can't do it that way because we've always done it this way. You have to have that growth mindset of completely shifting, completely thinking outside of the box and come up with some of these creative solutions. And that's what I love about getting on Zoom and Coach's Corner with people like Mark and Jason, is that we all have different, you know, personalities, but we also have different experiences. We have different points of views. And so we can provide a lot of value on these. If you liked listening to this Coach's Corner today, you can get your very own one-on-one personalized coaching call with one of our coaches. It could be one of the three of us, or we have 10 on staffs here. So, you know, this is being offered for a limited time. The link is in the chat box. Thank you, Leah. So click that link in the chat box, schedule yours, and you can ask the questions you may have been afraid to ask here. Get some advice and get some coaching on your specific situation. Leave with that peace of mind, get actionable, practical advice specifically for your company. And I'm not sure how much longer we're going to be offering these, so just make sure to get that link in the chat box and schedule your coaching call today. All right, team, that is it for us. Thank you so much, Mark and Jason, for joining us. Sure. And we'll see you soon in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Jennifer. Have a great one.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks.